And may I ask now Claus-Peter Offen and Alan Ginsberg to come up here and take over the chairs. Claus-Peter Offen, owner of the Claus-Peter Offen Reederei Shipping Group, and Alan Ginsberg, 25 years of experience in ship financing, who's going to ask the questions. Enjoy. This is yours.
I have a very strong voice. Maybe Mr. Tim took it.
Mr. Tim, you have to give the mic.
Thanks to all.
Good morning, Mr. Offen. Let's start with some physical market questions and then work to the finance stuff. You're best known as a container ship owner and operator. There's no reason to sugarcoat that the market today is difficult. What needs to be done in the container ship sector to things get better? More specifically, which vessel sizes are going to do better? And who do you expect the winners and losers will be?
Well, what we heard this morning from Paul with reference to the container market does not give us a very friendly picture about the state of our industry. The question we are all asking ourselves is what needs to be done to change the present situation. And I would say in the very short term, the only thing the industry can contribute would be a huge amount of scrapping. We have seen too little scrapping last year, I would say. 2014 was much, much better. But that is the only thing. And I personally hope that rather not 400,000, but 600,000 TEU will be scrapped this year. And I hope, or probably, the market pressure will lead to those scrappings. And it may well be that the average age, and we heard it, of vessels that will be scrapped is getting younger and younger. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see the first vessels built up to 2005 will be scrapped this year. That could easily happen. This will have a certain effect on the market, but in the medium term, I would say what could be wishful thinking is that finally the huge amount of new ordering will come to an end. But from the last press information we have, seems not to be very realistic. So we probably have to live with too much ordering. What I can say on behalf of our German community, and we've always been blamed to be responsible for these overcapacities in the market. I would say, looking back the last 8 years, the German part has been very, very small. It is almost down to zero. So this is not really the German Container Inc. that is responsible for the present market situations. But as I said, I'm a bit worried about the continuity in ordering new container ships and continuously big container ships. And last not least, but this I would say is the most crucial question we all have to ask ourselves. The main factor behind the present situation of our industry is not so much the recession in demand. I think the main issue we have to look at is the shipbuilding capacity. And as long as we have in this world a shipbuilding capacity which is more than twice, probably more than twice, of the needed capacity for fleet renewals, we will constantly be under pressure that any market that is on the way of improving, finding its balance, will be overbuilt very soon. So as long as we don't solve this question, and this is not us to solve the question, this is an issue which must be solved amongst the three main shipbuilding nations in the world. As long as I are in a position to have every year losses of billions and somebody takes over these billions year after year, we have a very complicated situation.
Thank you. We're in the middle of what analysts have described as the dry bulk apocalypse, to be hereafter referred to as the bulkopolypse. The question is the usual one. Are things really different this time, or is it time for some good old simple contrarian investing?
Well, we have, and I've been now more than 40 years in this industry, we have seen highs and lows in all our segments of the shipping industry. I would say this is the unnormal thing of this crisis is rather the length and the depth. Otherwise, it's the same pattern. It's too many ships for too few cargoes. That is a normal cycle. So I would not see any significant difference, as I said. If this is a moment to buy something, I have my doubts, and as has been mentioned earlier, many investors have been looking for distressed assets, and some of them have not been too happy. So, as always in our industry, buying second-hand or distressed is always a question of timing. And the question is it time right now? And this, I would say, I don't think so. I think we have not reached the bottom yet.
Try to pin you down. If you had $500 million unlevered to invest today, how would you spread it around, or would you be selling? All sectors?
Well, if I have to spend it in the shipping industry, which I would do with certain doubts, I must have to say, but if I had to, I think I would probably invest in my own industry, in the container industry. I would see a reasonable future for 8,000 TEU plus ships, based on a very low market level today. I would also consider ships smaller than 2,000 TEU with regional trades, and we saw earlier on the statistics, on the graphs, we saw that this is also a market which is definitely underbuilt, and we heard new buildings will be fairly expensive, so I would say yes, this could be also a good investment. I would keep my hands probably off anything between 3,000 and 6,000 TEU, but as all predictions, I can be wrong. I don't think it's a good moment to invest in tankers because I think we have reached a certain level which may not be sustainable in the long run because we do have these shipbuilding capacities, and some people may consider ordering new tankers. And on the bulk side, yes, not now, but at a certain moment, I think, yes, maybe it makes sense to build some Capesizers, but maybe in a year or 2 or 3 from now. Not today. I would keep my hands off the offshore business. My feeling is the oil price situation is completely out of control, and it's hard to say, will it last 2 years, 5 years? Who knows?
Turning to the capital markets, in 2005, you must have been approached by every investment banker in the universe to go public. What did you tell them back in 2005?
Well, unfortunately, not everyone came to me. There was only a very few that came, and in those days, we decided to stay private because prospects of the industry were still quite good. Sorry, what?
The question is, tremendous amounts of wealth were generated, and of course, lots of money was also lost. As an example, do you, being a container ship operator, do you think you could have created another C-SPAN?
Well, in those days, we had a very well-functioning system in Germany, which was a KG system, and myself and most of my colleagues were very much living with that successful system. And looking back, I would say C-SPAN did not do things completely different from us because they were like us, following the strategy to enter into the big ship market with long-term charters. So I think the philosophy of the two companies was the same. The difference was the access to the capital market. We were in the German KG market, which is also sort of a public market, and they were in the US market. Now with the German KG market disappearing, having disappeared, there is only the US market, and yeah, maybe one day we consider to go there, yes.
So has your view of the US market, capital markets changed, and if you were 25 years younger, would you answer the question any differently?
Well, if I was 25 years younger, I would still hopefully look at the actual market situation and take my decision of the facts that are there. And the fact is that at this moment, there is no German KG market. It may return. But if we need, and if we want to obtain fresh money, which you need to expand your company, at the moment you would rather go on the international markets. But even there, I would say, yes, this is in our planning, there's no doubt, and it has been published. But I again would say the timing is wrong. If you look at the recent development of the US stock markets, I don't think this is a brilliant moment to enter it.
Fair enough. Switching over to private equity and the hedge funds, we have two competing views. On one side is Steven Schwartzman, CEO of Blackstone, the world's largest private equity firm, who was recently quoted in the Wall Street Journal as saying, "Now's the time to buy." I appreciate he wasn't speaking specifically about shipping, but his views should be taken seriously. On the other, there was a recent article in TradeWinds suggesting that the hedge funds who've invested in shipping have been sufficiently burned, or at the very least, quite disappointed, and are starting to rethink about the investing in the sector. So the question is, who's right? And is it wishful thinking to believe that they're going to go away, or do you believe they're here to stay? And if so, is their presence as harmful as some people have suggested?
I wouldn't say that any of the two is right or wrong. As I mentioned earlier, it's basically a question of timing. Yes, some of the international investors, the hedge funds, have burned their fingers, but not because the investment basically was wrong, but the timing of the investment is wrong. So if Mr. Schwartzman says now the time is right to invest, I would have my doubts if the timing is correct. As I said, it's, in my feeling, the best moment for an investment in distressed assets is one day before the market goes up. The problem is, which is this day? So my feeling, and this is always a personal feeling, my feeling is tomorrow is not the day. So we should rather wait a little bit.
Follow-up question. Under what circumstances would you be willing to partner up with them?
Well, we would see, and we are actually having a lot of talks, and we would seriously consider this when we feel the moment appropriate. But I would still think that this would rather be on single purpose vehicles. We might do it. I don't think we are going public with our main company, no.
Moving on to the KG system, universal agreement that the system is largely broken today. My question is, can it be repaired? And more specifically, should it be repaired? And if so, how?
Well, I think we all learned a lot of things over the past years where a lot of money was lost. There's a few reasons, and one is that I would say leveraging probably was too high, taking into consideration these huge fluctuations we had in this crisis. In all the earlier crises, where I also had the pleasure to be part of, the fluctuations were not as great as this time. And now we saw that 30%, even 40% of equity is not enough to cover the risks of the up and downs of this market. These high fluctuations we knew from the bulk and the tanker trade, but in the past decades, not really from the container trades. So if you learn that lesson, and if you also learn the lesson that the normal investor in our country is not the man to participate in high risks of shipping, ships built on spec are not really made for public markets. If you have a long-term charter, we have a lot of them, as a matter of fact, then I think even in the German KG system that works, and we have a lot of companies which are still paying dividends today, the big ships with the whatever charters up to 2025, and the shareholders will be happy shareholders, but they probably will not invest at this moment because unfortunately they did not only invest in one of our 14,000 TEU ships, but they also invested maybe in some of our 2,000 ships where they are suffering. So at this moment, as long as in general feeling in the market is not positive, which we heard this moment, it's still critical what's going to happen. I think the moment again is not the best. Eventually, I think there will be again a German KG market sooner or later.
Medium term, a return with lower leverage and longer contracts.
I would think so, yes.
Let's move on to ship finance. To quote Michael Parker on the cover of TradeWinds, relationships will be tested. He maintains the can has been removed. I guess you could say it's gone for scrap. My question is, given the pressure that lenders themselves are under today, does that give them the right to take a more aggressive stance with owners today, or do you believe that they have a time-honored obligation to negotiate, even if the end game seems inevitable?
Well, if we look what is actually happening in the market is, of course, that the banks as well as the owners are suffering enormously from the market developments. The banks are under pressure, the owners too. What I observe is that still, in many cases, in most cases, there's a reasonable level of discussion with banks and owners, and wherever the banks see a fair chance for owners to overcome this crisis, we have the feeling there's a certain amount of support. So I would still say there is still a friendly go together on the, or let's solve the problems together. But of course, there are moments when a bank says, now we are close to coming to an end. They can say it in a friendly or an unfriendly way, I don't know, but I would say generally, my feeling is at least, that the relationship between the German owners and the German banks is reasonably good as it can be under very depressed market conditions.
I apologize for asking a leading question, but will the history of this market cycle show that if the lenders took more aggressive action earlier, they would have come out better?
That is, of course, a very speculative question, or a speculative answer, rather. Had we all known in 2008 that the crisis would still be existing in 2016, yes, I think somebody would have taken the break rather in 2009 and not now. But in those days, I must admit, everybody was still convinced that this was not a crisis that probably be going on for a decade, because we are not anywhere near the end. But then we have to look really, we're talking two crises, because the first crisis was what we call the after Lehman crisis, and the after Lehman crisis was really what we all expected, a crisis of 2 or 3 years. We saw the recovery already mid-2010, and then we had a new crisis, and this was mentioned also in one of the former conferences here, where we were questioning ourselves, will it be a V or a double V? And we really got the double V, and the second V was deeper and longer than the first V, and nobody did expect that at the moment. The reason is that after the recovery, there was a huge amount of new ordering. So we had a problem of overcapacities more than a problem of lack of demand.
Noted, but isn't the correct view that the sooner we cleanse the system of zombie loans and zombie banks, for that matter, the sooner the game can begin again in earnest?
Well, if we are talking now what you call a zombie loan, let's call it distressed loans, the problem in our industry is that with insolvency, a bankruptcy of 1 or 100 or 500 ships, this does not give any relief to the market. The ships will stay there. If we were talking a factory, a steel producer, a paper factory, and they are closed down, capacities will be taken out of the market and help a recovery. In our case, in our industry, only the ownership is shifted from A to B, and B will continue competing in the market. So it's not so easy really to say that getting rid of the zombie loans, we can't get rid of the ships. That is really the problem.
Fair enough. Continuing on, one of the hot button questions today is who should be allowed to pick up the pieces? Can the long-standing view of Germany Inc. with lenders and operators united to keep the the tonnage in local hands continue to hold out, or will the hedge funds ultimately get their hands on significant numbers of ships?
Well, I would say, unfortunately, there is no such thing as a Germany Inc. or whatever, but I have a lot of friends, colleagues, friends, but we're also competitors, and I think there's a very free, competitive market in this country. And I think that whenever the banks have the feeling they have to dispose of some ships, yes, they will to a certain extent try to find a solution with the present owner, but in the end, these ships are sold at market value in an open market to anybody, and I don't think a German owner will have a preference against a Greek or whatever other international owner or a hedge fund. And if you look, the number of ships that have been sold in the past years out of this country, most of them went out of this country.
Last question. We're going to hear an awful lot of negative stuff today, but if we're true ship owners, we're optimists at heart. So as we wrap up, can you leave us with some positive thoughts of wisdom, particularly for the younger generation in the audience today?
Well, we heard earlier, every crisis will have an end. I think this crisis will also have an end. And it's really a question of timing. And whenever we are in a crisis, and as I said, I have had 6, 7, or 8 in my life, you never know why in the end, you know why it ended, but you never knew the reasons before. And at this moment, there are things that may be happening in the future we don't even know of. Maybe the Salafists decide to close down the Suez Canal or whatever. There was always things, unpredicted things, that led to the end of a crisis. And I think this will also happen in our case, but I'm worried we will have to live another 2-3 years with at least with the present circumstances.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for this interesting interview, and thanks for giving us the next news that we have to wait another 2 to 3 years. So then we make it at least a decade. Ladies and gentlemen, it's coffee time. Please come back in half an hour, and the coffee is sponsored by FPGAIM. Thank you.